Hey everyone, welcome to another exciting episode of Kentik Close-Up, where we zoom in on the latest Kentik features, products, or capabilities. In each episode, our team brings you a focused interview and overview of just one aspect of the suite of Kentik's network observability solutions. I'm Leon Adato, one of the Kentik technical evangelists, and with me today are Chris O'Brien, one of our amazing product managers. Welcome.
Hi, Leon. Good to be here.
And also Steve Muse, also known as Smuse to those people who've known him from on IRC for a few years. He is one of our solution architects. Welcome to Close Up.
Welcome, everybody.
So I know that we have a job to do. I know we have things to talk about. However, we are full human beings. And I want to take a minute to just show up being our whole selves. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Yes, what your title is and what it means you do at Kentik, but also whatever is exciting in your life in general. Chris, since we have a shared history together, I'm going to pick on you first. What's up?
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I'm a product manager, which is like a fancy way to say I decide what we build. The dev team actually does the building. I just decide what we build. But to do that well, it's important to make sure those talented folks who are devoting their life to developing are targeting the right things, are building the right things. So I spend a lot of my time talking to customers and thinking about problems and figuring out, what is most important for our customers to be able to solve. So that's what I do as a product manager at Kentik, and specifically I work on Kentik NMS, which is our network monitoring system. Whole human being. Well, I did recently start mountain biking. I went mountain biking this last weekend, so I'm almost 40 now. I wore all of the protection to try not to break any bones. I had a friend who broke their elbow and is in physical therapy now, and I don't want to be that, but we'll see how that goes. I'm taking it slow.
Wonderful, very good. On all aspects, including the safety gear. Awesome. All right, Steve. A little bit about yourself, what you do, who you are, all that thing.
I'm Steve Muse. I work as a solutions architect here at Kentik. And some people say that I might take requirements from customers and give them to engineering, and I have people skills. To reference a funny movie. No, but seriously, I get to work with our service provider customers to understand what's happening in their networks, talk about latest trends, and give that feedback to Chris's team to understand, where this is all going, and find out what problems service providers are trying to solve at the current moment and in the very near future. On a personal level, outside of work, I have a family, 2 small kids and a wife, and a dog, a cat, and 20 plus chickens out in the backyard. So we're constantly trying to keep care of the mini family farm here. And I always have my finger in some sort of technology related product, whether that be weather monitoring, ham radio, all sorts of fun other technical stuff. So even if I wasn't doing this for work, I'd probably be still doing this on my own at home.
Got it. And do you want to share your ham handle in case, people want to try to get you?
Sure. N1. Yeah, it's N1JFU.
Okay, perfect. All right, we do have a job to do. We can't just sit here and chit chat the entire, and that job actually has a lot to do with support. It is more true than not that all of us provide support at one time or another, and some of us provide support a lot more than one time or another, and it kind of sucks. Not just for not the support that we give, but the experience. And it sucks on both sides of the ticket queue, both for the users and also for those providing support. And that is really the focus of the episode today. So I'd like Chris to start off and take a stab at why it's so painful to manage, especially specific to like monitoring tools.
Yeah, Leon, I don't know if we've ever talked about this before, but I started my career as a call center agent and then a knock agent who spent most of his time on the phone. So definitely I've been on both sides of the ticket queue. Yeah, I think one of the perennial challenges with any NMS is device support, making sure that all of the different, nearly infinite number of ways different makes and models of devices make their data points available, whether it's CPU percent or any other metric. make sure that those are all covered by the NMS. And this has been something that NMSs have been working on for literally decades, right? SNMP was invented in 1988, and we've all been working on it pretty much since then. And the sort of the how that has historically gone is it's kind of a heavy effort, because as a customer, you see a missing data point or you see a wrong data point, and then you go and tell your NMS vendor, hey, this doesn't look right. And then you wait a day or two, and the NMS vendor looks into it, and typically their first response is, I need an SNMP walk. So you have to go and find an SNMP walk tool, whether you just have a Linux command line, or you're a Windows guy, so you need to go and download something, and you'll take an SNMP walk and you'll send it over to support, and they'll be like, oh, that's not quite the right format, you need to have this argument or click this checkbox, like,
Right.
oh shoot, maybe include that the first time you asked me for it.
Right.
But you go and do that, and then you have to figure out how to transfer a file, and now bigger vendors will have some file management application that can securely transmit that file to them, and then they get it, and then on their side it basically goes into a queue as a request, whether they consider that a bug or a feature. And typically there's a lot of things sitting in that queue, so it might be that's a roadmap item, and we'll get to it when we can. And so maybe 6 months goes by, and they say, hey, good news, we've got to that thing, it made it to the top of our priority list, and so we started working on that. We've got a fix. It's great. It'll be out with the next release, which is like 2 months from now. You're like, and I think software is evolving. So this isn't, we're getting better here, but definitely that's how it's been for a long, long time. And once that release finally comes out, you deploy the release, and then you go and look at that little set of pixels on the screen that have always been empty, and you're like, oh, it's still empty. Like sometimes it didn't even work. I mean, a lot of times it does, but sometimes it didn't even work. You're like, okay, so I'll report that back, and you create a new ticket, and you're like, or you reopen it, and you're like, okay, this is a long-term thing. And so, with the Kentik NMS team, we know we're going to have to build a lot of this device support. We know that has the potential to be a primary point of frustration for folks. And we're like, if we're building a new NMS in 2023, what does that look like? Surely it can look better than that. So we've taken great pains to think through that and figure out a bunch of different ways to try and do better there.
Got it. All right. First of all, you're giving me flashbacks to the 16 years that I was doing on-call support and things like that. And I don't like it. I'm in this picture and I feel like I'm being assaulted. However, I will sit with my feelings and deal with it. But Steve, anything you want to add to that? Any other nuances about, again, why support is kind of painful for both people on the requester side and also on the internal side?
Well, I'll start on the internal side first. It's somewhat of a boil the ocean problem, because as we've seen, that there are customers who still have devices actively running on the network who are up, believe it or not, up to 30 years old. And so as a vendor, you have to support everything and everywhere in the SNMP protocol. Right? So you have an endless number of devices, and there are continually new models being released on a daily, weekly basis that you have to continue to support. Right. So you have to balance that against, incoming customer requests of what's important to them and so forth. Right. But we think there's a better way through proactive monitoring when customers add new devices. And in addition to sort of the traditional, I would like request for this particular model, Mr. Developer, please go build that, and then wait for the typical back and forth, delay of emails back and forth. Oh, you forgot to add the -H switch to that, command, and okay, that's another 2 weeks because the guy was on vacation, and yada yada yada. And so that's how we started with this, which was very, very painful, and it just which delays things very, very long period of time. And it's not fun for either side of the fence. It's not fun for the customer. It's not fun for us. We want to see rapid development, and that's one of Kentik's sort of like really big features from the beginning of our company has been rapid feature development. So having an ability to do that somewhat automatically and detect when a device doesn't have a particular type of support ahead of time is extremely important to us, and it's a problem we think we can solve.
Okay, so I want to see what we're doing with this, but before we do, I'm curious, what is our view of how to make this better? I mean, we've outlined why it's painful on both sides of the ticket queue, and what was going into it. What did we say? You know what? We can do this better. What Chris was saying earlier. We know we can do better. So, what was our going in assumptions about how we could improve that experience?
I mean, the first thing is that we are a SaaS first company, which means we can see the missing data points ourselves. It's not on-prem software that we would have to, get on a call and screen share or get a VPN or whatever it is to access. We can see that data ourselves, and customers are wanting us to fix those gaps. So we can see the data, and then we typically that SMP walk back and forth is the most onerous part, at least in terms of the user's experience, because they have to go and take a bunch of actions and figure out how to do that. And we knew that if we have a poller that is in the customer's environment that's gathering this data, why can't we just poll from that? Why do we need the customer to do anything? So we've got that as well. By default, we don't have permission to do that polling, but we've made it super easy for a user of the application to give us that permission. And so we can do that SNMP walk and get that data ourselves. And then, of course, we have some tooling on our side to recreate that, to build the support and so forth. That is pretty common with other vendors in the space. The next piece, though, is we can deploy an update to a specific poller, like this one customer's poller and maybe this one poller of theirs, and then see how that update works without doing a big software release to everyone in the world that uses our tools. And so, as soon as that is done, we can, again, look in their portal if they've given us access to do that and make sure that what was blank, a blank field, is now showing up as a number. And it's with that sort of validated by the customer, that number looks right to me, matches the CLI output, for example. We can then incorporate that and push that to all of our other customers. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different, it's essentially every step in that process has been made better. Steve came up with one of our best improvements, which was to get sort of proactive about this stuff. Steve, you want to talk about what you came up with there?
Yeah, sure. So when a customer onboards hundreds of devices, there might be one or two of them that aren't supported. So in the Kentik system, they show up as unknown device or unknown model. Maybe they know it's a Cisco, but we're not exactly sure which model type it is. So what we can do is proactively monitor all the devices that have been added, basically build a database query that says, look for any devices that have been added that aren't currently matched. The development team can get alerted to that fact that, hey, Cisco ID XYZ is currently not matched, and we can, as soon as that device gets added, get the alert, go add it. Maybe it's something as simple as just mapping that OID to a particular model, and update the configs, or it could be go build full device support for that model. But it can be done automatically, get notified proactively on the development side, so that we can, in the background, be automatically generating a ticket for the development team to go and build full device support for that, or something as simple as just mapping it to the right set of profiles. And then proactively push that configuration down to the customer and restart their NMS polling agent without them even knowing. So sometimes it happens within an hour of a new customer coming on board. We can have that one issue resolved without them even knowing it was a problem in the first place. Maybe they noticed it initially said unknown model, and then with 2 hours later, we might have it fixed already.
That's amazing. It's almost like tech support gaslighting, but in the best possible way, right? They
Exactly.
call and say, "Hey, you don't have any information about my." Oh, wait, never mind. Like, and in the background, we're like, "Yep, we got that one. Not a problem." So I love it. Okay, I must see this now. I must. I cannot wait another minute longer. So, Steve, can you take us through a quick demo?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Awesome. Let's go. We'll start here. What am I looking at?
So this is the Kentik NMS landing dashboard. So this is a way for you to see all the things that are happening in your network. But if you are having a specific device support issue, if we go to our device listing, the customer has the option to make this whole process easier. By default, we don't meddle with your devices. We don't look at your devices, but the customer can come up and say effectively, I would like to give Kentik the ability to poll my devices to look at the additional data to generate additional device support. So they can opt in or opt out of this ability for us to do a remote device walk. So then we can do something like, say, this particular NMS alert router here. We can drill into that and we can see, okay, we have inbound utilized interfaces, we have CPU utilization, memory utilization, BGP prefixes, but we're missing temperature. So either we notice that, the Kentik side notices that, or the customer notices that and says, hey, can you help me out, figure out why temperature isn't reporting? So now from within this one device's page, I can do an SNMP walk. And what I can do is use common MIBs. So if I wanted to see a listing of all the interfaces, I can do that just through a drop of a hat. And here we see the corresponding SNMP data. I can do the hex decode to show you exactly that this is, all these particular interfaces. So if I'm trying to troubleshoot that missing temperature, I could say something like, well, one of the many standard OIDs for that would be the entity sensor MIB, right? So I can come down here and choose that standard MIB and then start an SNMP walk for that set of OIDs. But we can see that the device responds back with no data. So we can say, okay, well, maybe this device doesn't support that particular OID. Maybe it's a Cisco, so they want to use the Cisco sensor MIB. So I can paste
And
that
I
up in
might
here.
break in here
Yeah.
and mention, Steve, that you have access to this because you are a Kintic solution architect. Everyone else, as a user of the tool, everyone can't do this, but this gives you a sneak peek into the tooling of how we make this possible yet.
I was going to say the same thing. Like, is this something that customers would see? And the answer is no. No, we built supportability into the back end so that we can do this. Okay, keep it going. Keep going.
So I can type in another MIB and I can see, okay, so this also proprietary Cisco MIB came back with no data. Okay, so maybe something's requires a little bit more in-depth walk, so I could go and pull down other MIBs. But basically, this 2-minute introduction of like, let me check this, let me check that, let me check this, let me check that. That has saved potentially weeks of back and forth and getting the customer involved and so forth. Having the ability just to go in here and look at something very quick to see what number format it is. Is this a string? Is this an integer? Is it something else, right? It eliminates that back and forth time. And then if we go back to the actual device, we realize, okay, this is a virtual device. It's a virtual machine. Virtual machine's not going to have temperature sensors. So I can say, oh, Mr. Customer, maybe you forgot that this is a virtual device. It doesn't have temperature sensors. Oh, I'm sorry. So it within a 2-minute period, it has completely eliminated this back and forth. But I can also, if I had noticed this ahead of time and it was, I could say, oh, we accidentally mapped this particular sysobject ID into the wrong profile. So let's just make that quick correction in the background and let me push that config down to this customer to test it. And if it works, then I can push it to the rest of the customer base or have it available for when they need to add that type of device in the future.
It also means
the UI is surprisingly fast there, but just to be clear on what's happening when Steve is clicking a button to go and get an OID, the Kintic sort of cloud, you could call it, the Kintic cloud is communicating with that customer's poller and it figures out which poller pulls that specific device typically. Tell that poller I need to go and query this OID, and then get that data back and send it back to the Kintic cloud and display it on this page. all of that is happening in just a couple of seconds. That's like, modern software is amazing at that. But, that replaces a phone call or an email and a wait and a review. And so taking something that's, 7 hours, 24 hours, a couple of days to, a click and waiting 5 seconds does a lot to speed this stuff up.
Absolutely.
It also shortens the cycle time on what I've seen, having done monitoring for a couple of decades or more, is also a customer who says, I'm not sure I can monitor my XYZ thing. I wonder what happens. And they're able to go in, whether it's a, free Kentik account or with an existing Kentik account, and they can just throw it on there, start monitoring it, and then start this dialogue of, this is a completely new device type, or it is a special custom device type, or whatever it is. Can we work together to find these things?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people they'll put their common, the devices that they've had for years, but they won't put the stuff that's actually valuable to the business because they're
Yeah.
just not sure what's going to happen. And here we can
We had an
really
example.
partner.
Yeah, we had an example of that happen recently where a large financial company had these massive tape robots that supported SNMP, but their major, number one SNMP polling NMS system, they flat out told them they weren't going to add support for it. But because we had the ability to look at the device remotely, we were able to quickly assess it. Like, yeah, this is very simple to do. I don't know why they wouldn't say no, but so we were able to, using this remote capability as a trial customer. They weren't even a customer of Kentik yet. We were able to do a quick poll of the device, look at their MIBs, and within 4 hours, we had working configurations for a device that was critical for them to be able to monitor, because the vendor software support for their monitoring system had expired, and they couldn't physically renew it, and their existing NMS vendor wouldn't support it. So for us, it was like a no-brainer. It was 3-4 hours worth of work, and we solved that problem for them.
This
Yeah,
also, sorry, Chris, go ahead. Sorry.
a lot of what NMS is founded on is to be more sort of a native data speaker, where it expects updates and configuration changes. So an example of that is all of the data that we collect, we normalize into an open config inspired data model. And so that makes it easy to do two things. One is you can add your own brand new data points, and then you can also directly save to the data points that the system considers sort of the authoritative data point for, like, CPU percent or interface utilization percent. So that data point now will show up on the out of the box dashboards. It will show up, of course, when you do a custom query here, it will show up. It will be eligible for alerting with out of the box alerts. So there's a lot of direct access you have into how data is collected and saved if you want it, that is facilitated by a bunch of the sort of the tooling that Steve was just showing. And I think particularly for larger environments who invariably have specialized gear whose sole function isn't like switching, where maybe CPU and interface utilization are actually not a great representation of the health of that device. Like this tape thing, you might want to know, how many tapes do I have left? Or if you're rewriting, can you rewrite on tape, or is it write once? But like the metrics you would care about are more having to do with that tape storage rather than in and out utilization on the tape backups interface. And so with this, you can talk to us and we can add custom metrics in a lot of cases, or you can just add those yourselves and start to get each device's sort of core function and the KPIs that best indicate the health of that function in the screen, in alerting, queryable, all of that data becomes available.
Right. The other thing that strikes me about this is that, you know, at Kentik, we talk about being, the network observability solution. And sometimes I get some funny looks like network observability. I didn't know those two words went together. But the fact is that we have built, our tool to be like every other cloud-based SaaS solution observability tool. Like, not only do we help you observe your network, but we've built the tool with all of those observability principles in mind, that if we need to do multiple deploys a day, I know that's the standard, DevOps concept, right? Dozens of deploys a day, 100 deploys a day. Like, we have built in the ability to manage and maintain not only the customer's environment, but also our environment. So those updates are able to happen ad hoc whenever we need them, not on some, as Chris, you outlined, well, it'll be 6 months before we have enough story points stored up to be able to do this, and then another 2 months before release, and blah, 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 blah. That old style that a lot of solutions still operate under.
Yeah, this is a
Okay.
subject
Yep.
that's near and dear to my heart. Observability. I think observability comes from the DevOps folks, the developer folks directly, and there's some brilliance in that idea. And we have a lot of super talented developers and DevOps people that are really evolving how we think about understanding and tracking and improving the health of a large distributed system. Um, One thing that gets forgotten in that conversation a lot of times is networks are pretty large and distributed. And for a number of years, they're increasingly getting treated like commodity, which is like your power, your lights. They should always be on. And the networking teams have figured out how to monitor and make that happen at a global scale and have been doing it for decades. So there is something that is really working right in this sort of traditional monitoring. And there's also some brilliant new ideas from the observability sort of way of thinking about it. So, my view is that the best outcomes come from when we combine and figure out how to use the tool that is strong in one way with another tool that is strong in a different way, and use all the tools on our tool belt for our goal. But I definitely think that there's a bit of shunning the network folks aside because observability is the cool, smart way to do it now. And I don't think that's a balanced way to look at it. I think both are super valuable.
Nice. Steve, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I think the other thing that we should be mentioning to folks is when they think about device support, we should be thinking not only in terms of which MIBs to support and things like that, but also which monitoring protocols we should be supporting. One of the main focuses that we're looking at is adding streaming telemetry support for as many vendors as possible. There aren't a lot of NMSs who are really making that a prime focus, and we definitely are trying to support as much as we can there. So, and by what Chris had mentioned before, which is by using the open config naming standard, we were normalizing all the data collected from any of the protocols to that open config namespace. So that as you transition from SNMP, say if you're very focused on pulling interfaces, as you transition from SNMP to streaming telemetry, there's not a transition in how you store the data in the database. It's all in the same place. You can pull those same name objects in the database regardless of what the underlying polling technologies. So it allows you to kind of normalize that collection layer. So it's another sort of important step. And a lot of people are starting to take their first steps, their first dip the toes in the water in streaming telemetry. And Kentik is providing a safe place for them to do that.
Amazing. Well, I appreciate you both taking some time out of your day because there's a lot going on. I mean, NMS only came out 3 months ago, and so I know there's still a lot more to do. There's a lot more features on the horizon. So, like I said, I appreciate you taking a minute out of the day to come talk to me on Close Up about it. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Neon.
I also want to thank all of you for watching this episode. It is no exaggeration to say that there is an overwhelming amount of bingeable content options, and we here at Kentik appreciate the time you've carved out for us. If you'd like to get notified when new episodes drop, remember to use the subscribe button below. For the Kentik Close-Up, I'm Leon Adato.